got to know going into it that, hey, you're going to have to work your ass off. You're going to have to learn constantly developing your skill set, and just keep pushing your own boundaries. And if you're comfortable, then you're not doing it right. This isn't ice, it's strong. I grew up in small town South Dakota. You know, I kind of always told myself as a young kid I was either going to play for the Lakers or be an Army Ranger. And you know, I got to a certain point in high school where it probably became pretty clear that I wasn't going to play for the Lakers. So I started to really focus my energy on, you know, joining the Army and becoming a Ranger. You know, I read books about Vietnam and heard the stories, you know, from my family, from my uncles, my dad. 9/11 had happened. You know, the war in Iraq had kicked off. And I actually tried to graduate early because I was worried that I would miss the war. Graduated on a Sunday and got picked up by the recruiter on Tuesday, and that became my military adventure. 3 deployments to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan, for 5 total. I got married. My wife had been with me through what would be 4 out of my 5 deployments. She wanted to start her career. The only thing that I could think of that would allow me to stay in the Army and still allow my wife to go where she wanted to go was, okay, let's volunteer to be a recruiter. They've got recruiters everywhere. My 3rd year on recruiting duty, and I'm sitting in my living room, like, you know, halfway through a 12-pack of beer, like, you know, just kind of getting nostalgic as you do every once in a while when you're no longer, you know, at the tip of the spear anymore. I have this like very specific memory of on my 4th deployment, we were getting ready to go on a mission. We were in the ready room, everybody was putting their stuff on, doing radio checks, you know, just doing all the stuff that you do before you go on a mission. And I remember, and I don't know why it took me 4 deployments to realize this, but I remember looking around and just being like, holy shit, like I am among this generation's 300 Spartans at Thermopylae. We had staff sergeant team leaders. We had a platoon sergeant that has gone on to have an absolutely legendary career. We had guys on that deployment who are now serving in tier 1 units. Like these guys were shit hot. And I just remember looking around, it was just like 10 seconds that I just took it in. And I remember like wanting to have the posterity just realize how lucky I was to have made it into this unit and to be with this group of guys on this deployment at this moment in time. And so I wrote this thing, I called it The Ranger. You know, it's just kind of like an experience of how I perceived the guys that I worked with. And I was like, you know, got done with it. I was like, that is like not bad. And so I kind of put it out into the internet there, and it picked up a lot of steam really quickly. And I had guys, you know, reaching out asking for like, hey, can you put this on a t-shirt, or can you put this on a poster or something? And before I knew it, I kind of had this like business that kind of felt like, man, maybe I should get out and see this through. And we were like, yeah, let's take a chance here. That's where I started my first business. And then brought on some business partners. And it was kind of a scary thing of like, man, I didn't see myself doing this, do the entrepreneur thing and start a business and all this other stuff. But I wasn't passionate about it. But what it exposed me to was this world of storytelling. Because you start a company like, okay, so I need to start a blog and we need stories for the blog. So I'll start writing some stories. Before I knew it, I was, you know, working on a book with a couple of guys. And that was called Violence of Action. Probably still holds up as the most complete history of the 75th Ranger Regiment in the War on Terror. Me and my buddy Leo decided to go do a fundraiser for a veteran nonprofit called Gallant Feud. You know, we start with Denver with $100, and man, we made it to the Italian-Slovenian border. We raised a shit ton of money for Gallant View doing that. We made a documentary about that, and that documentary won a film festival. I started to be exposed to journalism, to fiction writing, to nonfiction writing, to filmmaking. I think I like this better than running a business. You know, my wife's like, hey, check out this thing I found on Instagram. These people are like living on a van out on the road. If you want to do that, I am totally down to do that. And so that's what we did. You know, we bought a van, split up my business, and some people took chunks and we sold other chunks. And I kind of went on the road with like, hey, I'm going to knock out a screenplay. I'm going to start freelance writing. I'm going to start learning journalism, and I'm going to be a storyteller. That's what we did. And that's kind of what set me on the path of journalism and storytelling. I went on to cover the Standing Rock protests, both at their height as well as when they were shut down. Around that same time, I was working on a History Channel show, and that really exposed me to like, okay, here's how a professional, non-scripted series works. I've traveled to Tanzania to climb Mount Kilimanjaro and tell the story of a veteran nonprofit that was inspiring other veterans. So I think when you're transitioning out of the military, that chapter is about to come to a close for you. And you have to level with that, right? And you have to look at, well, you know, what's the next thing that I'm doing? Now, whatever career you're going into, now you have to say like, okay, I have to be better at that than I was at what I did in the military. I wasn't the best ranger in the world, and there's better photographers than me now, there's better writers than me now, there's better filmmakers than me right now, but I'm not gonna quit trying to be better than I was yesterday. And I think that's the attitude that everybody's gotta have. I knew the guys involved in Black Rifle Coffee before there was a Black Rifle Coffee. I met Jared Taylor. He was the one that kind of introduced me to Matt Best. They started Article 15 together. Really cool to be around other, you know, guys that were starting a business, were very successful at it. And then, you know, I remember we went down to SHOT Show one year. They introduced me like, oh, hey, you got to meet this guy, Evan Hafer. So I was just immediately impressed by him. He's a super personable guy. You know, he asked me, hey, do you want to come out? And, you know, Matt's going to be out here, Jared's going to be out here. We're going to bring some other guys out, and it'll be really fun. We're going to shoot like a commercial for this new company that I'm starting called Black Rifle Coffee. I was in this commercial they did where we waterboarded Evan. It was really fun. And then they're like, hey, we're going to go up to Whitefish. Do you want to come along? And we take this road trip up to Whitefish, and along the way we pick up Logan Stark. Ended up making friends with everybody, and it was a great trip. And you know, before we know it, Jared and Matt and those guys moved up to Salt Lake, and you know, I'd occasionally come out and hang out. I'd write some articles for them here and there for their blog, and try to just help out wherever I could. At a certain point, I think it was just a couple years later, it's like their third year in business, I want to say. You know, Evan started talking to me about like starting this new media venture. I pitched the entire room. It was all of their executives, all the founders, and I pitched them my idea. Let's make this like the Vice for the military. You know, maybe they were a little bit skeptical. I remember Evan, he was like sitting right to the left of me, and he looked at me and was like, hey man, you know, like I think this sounds good, but like if it doesn't work out, like no hard feelings, we can still be friends. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you know, of course, you know. They hired me on, and within 2 weeks I was in Afghanistan embedded with the Special Forces ODA, and we were off to the races. Just heard gunshots. We had to build everything from the ground up. We had to attract writers and talent. We had to attract an audience. We went around the world. We went to Iraq, we went to Afghanistan, we went to Europe, we went everywhere trying to get good stories, and overall it started to build momentum. I've got writers that are out there with CS gas and rubber bullets. I've got a writer out in Ukraine that's reporting on the war between Ukraine and Russia and its implications. You know, where we've arrived at is this thing that a lot of people are really excited to come read or watch. Coffee or Die magazine is a group of people that are going out into dangerous, austere, dynamic situations to report incredible stories about people who are putting it all on the line for America or American ideals.